Are you refusing a direct request, David? Richard Sterling's voice was dangerously low. We weren't talking about a market analysis for his real estate empire. We were talking about his wife's pampered Pomeranian. I have family plans, Richard, I said calmly. I can't dog-sit this weekend. 15 years of my life dedicated to a Scottsdale firm, and this was the hill my career died on. Then you can have every weekend after that. You're fired. Get out. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand, like he was swatting a fly, but as I packed my desk, my hand closed around a small, plastic flash drive. He didn't know this fly had a sting worth millions in tax fraud. 15 years. I wasn't just his top analyst, I was his right hand, his confidant. I'd missed my own anniversary dinner to close the Bayside Tower deal for him. I'd worked through the night on financials that made him millions while he vacationed in Monaco. And my family plans? My son's championship Little League game. The one I swore I wouldn't miss this time. He knew that. He just didn't care. Stepping out of the Sterling Holdings Tower for the last time, the Scottsdale sun felt different, colder. The flash drive in my pocket was a heavy, cold reminder of the truth. It wasn't something I'd stolen out of spite. It was my copy of the real books, the ones Richard kept hidden from the IRS. I'd made it 6 months ago. Not for revenge, but for self-preservation. A quiet insurance policy after he'd restructured the pension plan and left loyal employees with pennies on the dollar. I never thought I'd cash it in. I respected the man, or at least the empire we built together. But Richard Sterling didn't just fire an employee over his spoiled mutt, he'd just armed his worst enemy. The memory is sharp, metallic, like the taste of blood in your mouth. It wasn't a single moment, but a slow, creeping rot that started 6 months ago. It began in a sterile conference room where Richard announced the pension re-evaluation. I watched Frank, a man who'd given Sterling Holdings 40 years of his life, a man who taught me the ropes when I was a green analyst fresh out of college, just collapse in his chair. Not physically, but spiritually. His face went gray. He was 3 years from a comfortable retirement. In an instant, his future became a rounding error on a spreadsheet titled Operational Efficiencies. Later that week, Richard clapped me on the shoulder, his Patek Philippe watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Had to be done, David," he'd said, his voice as smooth as aged scotch. "Sometimes you have to trim the fat to keep the body healthy." He looked right past Frank's now empty desk as he said it. That was the moment my loyalty began to curdle into something else. The opportunity to act came 2 weeks later, born from Richard's own brand of arrogant carelessness. It was almost midnight. He called me, his voice thick with expensive wine from whatever 5-star restaurant he was entertaining investors at. "David, my boy, I need you to pull the financials for the Sedona project. I told them I'd have the projections by morning. They're in my private server folder, RS Projects, password is Legacy1. He trusted me. That was his fatal mistake. His private server was a digital monument to his ego, boat receipts, country club invoices, notes for his wife's charity galas. But tucked away in a mislabeled subfolder, a file simply named Adjustments caught my eye. I opened it out of sheer curiosity. My blood ran cold. It wasn't one ledger, it was 2 side by side on my screen. One was the official record, the meticulously clean version we filed with the IRS. The other was the truth. Shell corporations based in the Caymans. Construction materials for his new Paradise Valley mansion listed as commercial overhead. Millions in profits, siphoned through ghost entities that existed only on paper, vanishing before the taxman could even smell them. This wasn't just trimming the fat. This was butchering the whole system for personal gain while men like Frank were left with the bones. My hands trembled, but my mind was a block of ice. I wasn't just looking at numbers. I was looking at Richard Sterling's entire empire, balanced on a knife's edge of pure, unadulterated fraud. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid the small, plastic flash drive into the USB port. The progress bar, tracking the file transfer, felt like the longest minute of my life. Every creak of the HVAC system, every distant siren on Scottsdale Road, sounded like his footsteps returning to the office. Copy complete. I ejected the drive. It felt warm in my palm, I slipped it into my pocket, a silent vow made in the dark. At the time, I told myself it was for protection. An insurance policy against a man who saw people as disposable assets. I never imagined I'd be the one to light the fuse. I made it to the game. My son Leo was on third base, dirt smudged across his cheek, eyes locked on the batter. The world shrank to the size of that baseball diamond. For a few precious hours, there was no Sterling Holdings, no pampered Pomeranian, no box full of 15 years of my life sitting in the trunk of my car. There was only the sharp crack of the bat and the roar of the parents as Leo sprinted for home plate. He slid, a cloud of dust erupting around him. Safe. He pumped his fist in the air, his grin a beacon. In that moment, watching him, the cold knot of rage in my stomach tightened into something solid. Something purposeful. Richard Sterling hadn't just taken my job. He'd tried to take this from me. That night, long after my wife and son were asleep, I sat in the dark of my home office, the glow of the monitor painting my face in pale blue light. The house was silent. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. It was small, insignificant, yet it held the power to topple an empire. I thought of Frank's gray face. I thought of the other loyal employees Richard had discarded like used-up pens. I thought of his casual, arrogant dismissal of my life for the sake of his weekend convenience. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all of them. My insurance policy was about to be cashed in. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The files loaded, a neat list of felonies. My first instinct was to send it all in an anonymous package to the IRS. But I knew Richard. His lawyers were sharks. They'd bury it in litigation, delay it for years, and paint the source as a disgruntled, untrustworthy ex-employee. No. Richard didn't operate in the shadows. He thrived in the spotlight, basking in the glow of civic awards and philanthropy galas. That's where I had to hit him. In public. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't searching for government agencies. I was searching for a predator of a different kind, an investigative journalist. It didn't take long to find her. Sarah Jenkins, a reporter for the Arizona Chronicle. Her portfolio was a graveyard of corrupt politicians and white-collar criminals. She didn't just report the news. She dug until she hit bone, and then she kept digging. Her latest series had dismantled a fraudulent charity run by a local real estate mogul, a man who happened to be one of Richard's closest friends and golf partners. She was perfect. She already hated his kind. The next day, I drove to a public library across town. Using their computer, I created a new encrypted email address, nemo74@protonmail.com. Anonymous. Untraceable. I began to type, my message to Sarah Jenkins precise and clinical, like a market analysis. Subject: The Real Sterling Legacy. Times MS Jenkins. Times Cause. You've written about the shiny facade of Scottsdale's elite. I can give you the rot underneath. Sterling Holdings Group is not the company it appears to be. Its foundation is a multi-million-dollar tax fraud scheme, orchestrated by Richard Sterling himself. Times proof is difficult to trust from an anonymous source, so I've attached a sample. A single falsified invoice from the construction of Mr. Sterling's new Paradise Valley mansion, billed to a commercial project as site prep overhead. It's one of hundreds. I have them all. If you want the rest of the story, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the real ledgers, place a small personal ad in your paper's Sunday classifieds. Under Furniture for Sale, list A, Vintage Oak Desk, and in the description use the phrase solid, honest construction. Times that will tell me you're interested. And that you work alone. I attached the single file. My cursor hovered over the Send button. This was it, the point of no return. I wasn't just an analyst anymore. I was a source. A whisper. A ghost in Richard's machine. I clicked Send. I closed the laptop. The click of the lid shutting felt unnervingly final. Walking out of the library, the bright Arizona sun no longer felt cold or hostile. It just was. There was no jolt of adrenaline, no tremor of fear. Just a profound, unnerving calm. The kind of calm that settles over a battlefield after the first shot has been fired. I had crossed a line, and there was no sense in looking back. The only way was forward. The next few days were an exercise in methodical deception. I updated my LinkedIn profile with the crisp, professional language of a man seeking new opportunities. I took calls from recruiters discussing my unexpected departure from Sterling Holdings with practiced disappointment. I played the part of a man blindsided, a loyal employee cut loose in a corporate shuffle. To the outside world, I was just another casualty of the game, a victim. It was the perfect cover. At home, I threw myself into the routine of a man between jobs. I made pancakes for Leo, quizzed him on his spelling words, and fixed the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink. My wife Jessica would watch me, her brow furrowed with a mixture of worry and support. "We'll get through this, David," she'd say, squeezing my hand. I'd squeeze back, the lie a bitter taste in my mouth. She saw a husband worried about our mortgage. She had no idea her husband was trying to burn down an empire. Every normal moment felt like a scene from a life that was no longer entirely mine. But beneath the placid surface of domesticity, a silent countdown was running. Every action, every conversation, was secondary to a single consuming focus. The Sunday edition of the Arizona Chronicle. Sunday morning arrived with a heavy, humid stillness. I walked to the end of the driveway, my bare feet on the warm concrete. The newspaper was there, wrapped in blue plastic, just like any other week. I carried it inside, the newsprint smelling of ink and potential ruin. Jessica was making coffee. Leo was watching cartoons. Normalcy. I spread the paper across the dining room table, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I bypassed the front page, the sports section, the glossy ad inserts. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I unfolded the classifieds. The tiny print blurred together. Past, antiques. Past, autos for sale. Then, furniture for sale. My eyes scanned the column, line by agonizing line. A mahogany bed frame. A leather sectional. A set of bar stools. Nothing. My breath caught in my throat. Had she dismissed it? Thought it was a crank? And then I saw it. Tucked at the bottom of the column, a small, two-line ad. Na vintage oak desk. Lightly used, excellent condition. Perfect for home office. Solid, honest construction. The words hung in the air. A secret handshake in plain sight. She'd taken the bait. A cold smile touched my lips. The first gear of the machine had just clicked into place. Richard Sterling's world was about not an act of triumph, it was a confirmation, a signal that the chain reaction had begun. Now I had to control the blast radius. Back at the library, the anonymous email account felt like a familiar weapon in my hand. My message to Sarah Jenkins was even shorter this time, stripped of all pleasantries. It was a set of instructions, cold and precise. Train's subject: the meeting Styes Public Market Cafe. Tuesday, 11 a.m. Come alone. No recorders, no cameras, no colleagues. You will sit at an outside table facing the street. Order a black coffee. Place your car keys on the table to your right. If any of these instructions are not followed, I will not approach, and you will never hear from me again. There was no signature. I didn't need one. I was no longer David Miller, former analyst. I was Nemo 74, a ghost with a ledger. I hit send and walked away without a second glance. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in feigned normalcy. I mowed the lawn. I helped Leo with a model rocket for his science class. The smell of glue and balsa wood, a strange counterpoint to the high-stakes game I was playing. Every moment was a performance. I was the devoted father, the unemployed but optimistic husband. But inside, I was meticulously planning, running through every possible outcome of the meeting. What if she brought the police? What if she tried to record me? What if Richard had somehow gotten to her first? I had contingency plans for my contingency plans. Tuesday morning, I dressed in the most forgettable clothes I owned. A plain gray polo shirt, jeans, a generic baseball cap. I drove my wife's car, a nondescript sedan, and parked it 3 blocks away from the cafe. I walked the rest of the way, my path weaving and indirect, watching for anyone who might be watching me. The Phoenix public market was busy. A lunchtime hum of conversations and clattering dishes. I bought a bottle of water from a vendor across the street and took a seat on a bench partially obscured by a large potted cactus. I had a clear view of the cafe patio. At 10:55, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense haircut walked up to the patio. Sarah Jenkins. She looked exactly like her author photo in the paper. She scanned the crowd, a subtle, professional assessment. She followed my instructions to the letter. She sat at the designated table, ordered a black coffee, and placed her keys to her right. She didn't look at her phone. She just watched the street, waiting. A predator waiting for its prey. She didn't know the prey was watching her from the shadows. After 10 minutes of observation, satisfied she was alone, I made my move. I approached her table not from the street, but from behind, emerging from the flow of foot traffic inside the market. I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down before she even registered my presence. She startled, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before her professional mask snapped back into place. "You're him," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I replied, my voice low. I kept the brim of my cap angled down. "Thank you for coming alone." "I don't like being told how to do my job," she said. Her tone clipped. "This better be worth it." "It will be." I leaned forward slightly. "Let's be clear, you don't know my name. You will make no attempt to find out. I am your source, nothing more. You will protect me with the same ferocity you use to destroy the people you write about. Are we in agreement?" She held my gaze, her own unwavering. "If your information is good, you'll have my protection. If it's not, you're wasting my time. Show me what you have." I almost smiled. She was exactly what I'd hoped for. I shook my head. "Not yet. This isn't a simple transaction. I'm not just handing you a folder and walking away. I need to know I can trust you. I need to know you're as good as your reputation." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "You sent me a doctored invoice. I'm here. That's your proof." That was the invitation. This is the interview. I reached into my pocket, but I didn't pull out the flash drive. I pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. That's the name of a shell corporation, Sonoran Vista Holdings, LLC. It's registered in Delaware, but its mailing address is a P.O. box here in Scottsdale. She glanced down at it, then back at me, her eyes narrowed. And it's the entity that was used to purchase a private jet last year, a Bombardier Global 6000. Richard Sterling uses it like his personal taxi. Except, Sonoran Vista Holdings is listed as a subsidiary of a commercial construction company that Sterling Holdings acquired 3 years ago. That jet is being written off, piece by piece, as a depreciating corporate asset against construction profits. The fuel, the maintenance, the pilot's salary, it's all being buried as business expenses. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She understood immediately. It wasn't just an expense, it was a verifiable link, something she could track through public records. "This is good," she admitted, her voice cautious. "It's a breadcrumb, Ms. Jenkins," I said. "The flash drive in my pocket contains the entire bakery, the real ledgers, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the names of every ghost entity used to siphon millions of dollars out of Sterling Holdings before it ever touches the IRS. Proof that Richard Sterling has been committing federal tax fraud on a massive scale for at least a decade." Her breath hitched. I saw it. The hunger, the glint of a career-defining story. "Why?" she asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Why me? Why now? What's your angle?" I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I thought of Frank's gray face. I thought of my son's smile at the baseball game. You think this is about a disgruntled employee getting revenge? It started that way. But it's bigger than that. 6 months ago, Richard Sterling restructured our pension plan. He gutted it. Men who gave him 40 years of their lives will now retire on scraps, while he writes off his private jet as a business expense. He calls it trimming the fat, I call it theft. And I want to see him pay for it, not just with fines, with everything. Sarah Jenkins stared at me, her professional composure replaced by a raw, predatory focus. The kind of look a shark gives just before it strikes. She finally saw the whole picture, not just a tax story, but a story of greed, betrayal, and the kind of corporate rot she lived to expose. He gutted the pensions, she repeated softly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. He gutted people's lives, I corrected. Without another word, she leaned back, a silent agreement. The interview was over. I had passed. I took the flash drive from my pocket. It looked so small, so insignificant resting in my palm. I slid it across the table. It stopped just short of her coffee cup. This is it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The real books, the offshore accounts, everything. Once you take this, I don't exist. You never met me. You received an anonymous package in the mail. She picked up the drive, her fingers closing around it. You'll be a ghost. A ghost is exactly what I need to be, I said, standing up. Do good work, Miss Jenkins. I turned and walked away, melting back into the lunchtime crowd without looking back. The weight in my pocket was gone, but a heavier one had settled on my soul. I had just handed a lit stick of dynamite to a woman who couldn't wait to use it. The following 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I lived in a state of suspended animation, a quiet, nerve-shredding purgatory. I went through the motions of a job search, sending out resumes for positions I had no intention of taking. I coached Leo's baseball practice, my mind a million miles away, replaying my meeting with Sarah, scanning the faces in the stands for anyone who looked out of place. Every time the phone rang, my stomach twisted into a knot. Every car that lingered on our street sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Jessica saw the strain. She mistook it for the stress of unemployment. Something will come through, David, she'd say, her hand on my arm. I'd nod, the lie a constant, heavy presence. The first tremor came via a text from Mark, a junior analyst I'd mentored at Sterling Holdings. Things are crazy here. A reporter from the Chronicle is asking questions. Richard is losing his mind. Told us not to talk to anyone. Asterix? So it had begun. Sarah was rattling the cage. 10 days later, the earthquake hit. It was a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee, scrolling through the news on my tablet when the headline appeared. It was the lead story on the Arizona Chronicle homepage, a picture of Richard Sterling smiling at a charity gala right below the stark black letters, Sterling's Shadow Empire. Leaked documents reveal decade-long multi-million-dollar tax fraud asterisk. My breath caught in my chest. I clicked the link. It was a masterpiece of journalistic destruction. Sarah had missed nothing. The shell corporations. The falsified invoices for his mansion. The private jet written off as a construction asset. She'd even interviewed former employees, anonymous sources, who confirmed the gutting of the pension fund. She had built a cage of facts, and Richard Sterling was trapped squarely inside it. By noon, it was a national story. By 3 o'clock, Richard Sterling stood behind a podium in his company's lobby, his face a mask of controlled fury. He was flanked by a team of stone-faced lawyers. These allegations are baseless, a vicious and cowardly attack on my reputation and the integrity of this company, he snarled into the microphones. They are based on stolen, doctored documents provided by a disgruntled former employee, seeking personal revenge. This is a work of fiction, and we will pursue every legal avenue to fight these lies. He was looking right at the camera, but I knew he was looking for me. He was trying to discredit the source. To discredit me, he thought it was my word against his. He was wrong. That night, I went back to the public library for the last time. My final email to Sarah Jenkins was short. Nines Fink times subject to the narrator, Nines Finks Jenkins, he's right. Anyone could fake a spreadsheet. He will claim I doctored the numbers for revenge. But a man cannot fake his own voice. There is a hidden encrypted partition on the drive. You missed it. The file is named legacy_memo.wav, nexov. It's an audio recording of a meeting from 4 months ago. Richard didn't like leaving a paper trail for certain Wi-Fi adjustments. He dictated them to me. It's him, in his own words, explaining how to hide the profits from the Sedona project through an offshore entity in the Caymans. The password is Franks_future, checkmate, tourist for I hit send. As I walked out into the cool desert night, I could almost hear it, the sound of Richard Sterling's confident, arrogant voice, captured on his own voice, narrating his own downfall. I didn't need to wait long. Less than 12 hours later, the Tuanak, Arizona Chronicle website updated. The headline was a single, devastating word: checkmate. Below it was an embedded audio player. Sarah Jenkins had done more than just post the file. She'd written a searing analysis, transcribing the most incriminating lines. His voice, so full of arrogance and casual criminality, was now public domain. The lie about a disgruntled employee evaporated in an instant. You can argue with a spreadsheet. You can't argue with a man's own words condemning himself. The fallout was biblical. By midday, the IRS and the SEC announced concurrent federal investigations into Sterling Holdings Group. The stock, which had merely dipped before, didn't fall. It cratered. It was a free fall with no bottom. TV news crews were camped outside Sterling Tower, their cameras aimed at the gleaming glass building like siege weapons. I watched it all from my home office, the same room where my life had been upended just weeks before. There was no champagne, no triumphant fist pump. Just a profound, heavy silence. On the screen they showed Richard Sterling attempting to leave his mansion, his car swarmed by reporters. His face, once a portrait of untouchable power, was ashen. The mask was gone. He looked old, cornered, and utterly defeated. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank, the man whose stolen future had lit this fuse. I hadn't spoken to him since I was fired. My heart hammered as I opened it. The message was simple. I heard the news, I don't know how, but thank you. I closed my eyes. The rage that had fueled me for weeks finally subsided, replaced by a quiet, aching sense of justice. Richard had tried to take my future, my son's baseball game, my dignity, all for a weekend with his dog. He had dismissed me like a fly, but he forgot that even the smallest things, when pushed too far, can develop a sting. My victory wasn't in his ruin. It was in that text message. It was in the knowledge that for once, a man like Richard Sterling didn't get away with it. The empire was burning, and it had been brought down by a ghost with a flash drive and a memory of what was right. So now you have to tell me, if you were in my shoes with that folder of evidence, what would you do? Report him for justice, or just walk away and let karma do its thing?